What's the word, Harrisburg? My name is Matt Maisel. We are in the thick of it right now when it comes to summer activity. Spending a lot more time outside. Families doing a lot more activities outside. And with that, unfortunately, we have to talk about it, comes a lot of safety precautions. Really important stuff. And our guest today is going to shed some light on what you should be doing with you and your kids throughout the summer, just to make sure it's at the forefront of your mind. Amy Bollinger from Penn State Health, nurse there, trauma nurse. Thank you, as always, for joining us. You're a favorite guest of ours. Appreciate you coming back.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be able to talk about this stuff today.
And you're thrilled because it's really important. Not that it's fun to talk about, because that's the thing. Like, we're going to get into some really deep, heavy subject material here, but it's also things that we have to talk about as parents, that if we don't talk about, then tragic stuff could happen.
Right. I always say this when you and I talk, especially about kid safety or family safety. You know, my intention is not to be the queen of gloom and doom, right? Or Susie Safety, or any of those little cliches we talk about. My goal is to really talk with you about little tricks and things to think about that we can do to decrease our risk while we're having fun. Not to go not have fun.
Right.
We want people to have fun and enjoy your summertime and do all the things with our families and our children, but to really think about what are those things we can control to keep our kids safe or keep our families safe.
All right, so what is it that you are seeing as we tape this at the end of June, hitting the airwaves, start of July? At this point, we are a few weeks into what we would consider post-school summer.
Yes.
Kids are out there. What are you and your colleagues at Penn State seeing the most right now in terms of child trauma-related incidents?
Sure. So for kids, children, we're seeing bike accidents, pedestrian accidents, ATV collisions.
A lot more ATVs.
Oh my goodness, ATVs, which we can talk about this morning. Seeing some drownings or near drownings. We see it every year, unfortunately. Lawnmower accidents, kids riding on the lawnmower with grandpa or dad or a family member, and they become injured severely. So we're seeing a lot of those different kinds of injuries.
And we're also kind of right on the forefront of July 4th.
Yes.
And that means a lot of fireworks type of activities going on. I guess let's start there, because
Sure.
it is July 4th is right here.
Yes.
And even fireworks go well past July 4th.
They do.
We know that. What should parents keep in mind with their kids, or if there's a big group of kids over at the house and you have fireworks or send them off, what do you tell them to kind of keep in mind more than anything else?
So fireworks cause injuries, they cause burns, they can cause partial amputations if they're the big fireworks, not the sparklers. Sparklers can cause burns. I was looking at this earlier today. In 2021, 15,000 emergency department visits for firework injuries across the country.
15,000.
15,000.
Wow.
Boggles my mind. I would never have guessed it was that high. So we see a lot of injuries with burns. Sparklers, I didn't know this, burn up to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. So small children, when you think you're handing your child a sparkler, they get burned. So you really have to pay attention.
The sparkles have to go somewhere, and they're going to land on your skin.
Correct. Or are they holding it in the right place? Or I would highly recommend that small children under the age of 5 either should not be holding sparklers, right? Glow sticks, something else that's fun for them to play with, but really under the age of 5, their little hands have difficulty holding tightly onto the sparkler, and it's, again, 1,200 degrees. So lots of burns. I mean, couldn't you make the argument that, and again, I'm not trying to be the one that sounds like Debbie Downer here, but couldn't you make the case that no kids under the age of 13 even it scares
hold a
me
sparkler?
For them. It scares me for them. I worry about kids who are playing around, and again, we want to have fun. We want kids to have fun and enjoy being children. That's what the job of a child is, to explore their world, to have fun, to get to be a part of this great world we all live in. But you have to also be cautious, and the younger the child, the higher the risk.
I go back to, and this ended up being a funny moment, but I go back to in December. My family, we were celebrating Hanukkah, and my daughter, who was 2 at the time, uh, saw the flame of the candle and touched it, and
Sure.
it was the mess around find out sort of sort of
Right.
moment.
Right.
But in the moment, it
Hmm.
like it said, oh, that's right,
Yeah.
fire hurts.
Oh, it hurts,
But
right?
that's a quick kind of
Hmm.
touch the flame,
Hmm.
and you're going to be
Hmm.
fine.
Hmm.
Fireworks, there's a lot more potential for you. This is not a mess around and find out. This is a
Right.
mess around and you're going to
It
end up
hurt.
in the hospital
Right.
sort of situation.
Right. And think about, when do we use sparklers? In the dark, right?
Mm,
At night.
yes.
Generally, when there's a lot of, like, generally you're having a picnic or a party, and the adults might not be paying super close attention to the kids running around having fun with the sparklers, and kids are going to take the sparklers and run across the backyard with them. There's just, it's a setup for injury. So I'm not saying don't play with sparklers, but what I'm saying is be cognizant and be aware of what the dangers could be.
If I'm with my kids at a party, a
Hmm.
backyard, a festival, a grill, barbecue,
Hmm.
whatever, how far back should I be staying from the person that is setting off the fireworks, whether they're
Oh,
sparklers
yeah.
or
Or the
actual big fireworks?
a lot of feet, right? 20 feet. I would not be near them. I think the fireworks that we purchase and think we're going to set off in our backyard really scare me, because those can be very dangerous. We see kids and adults come in having held a firework in their hand too long, and the firework explodes, and so do their fingers. Like, it's awful to talk about, but this is the reality of what we see. You have to know what kind of firework you're dealing with. In this time right now, when we've been in this drought, I know it's rained a lot in the last week, but in this time of drought, those fireworks go up, they explode, they look pretty, and then those hot ashes come
Mm.
down onto your house, onto your garage, onto your porch,
On your hand,
onto
on
your
your
hand.
arm.
They're hurting you, or they could potentially burn your house down. You have to pay attention to that kind of stuff.
The other thing that comes up a lot, and we've talked about it before, you mentioned it right off the bat, is incidents with drownings
Yes.
and spending a lot of time with pool safety,
Hmm.
things like that. I guess I'll just cede the floor to
Sure.
you. What is it that you're seeing the most of? Like, why do drownings happen as much as they do?
Because we take our eyes off our children. We think it's not going to happen to us. We think that we become, it's never happened to me before. I don't know anybody who's had a child drown. My child knows how to swim. They're safe. I've got stuff to do. It's okay. It's not going to happen. Nobody, and I think about this a lot, nobody who comes to the trauma center wakes up in the morning with a plan to end up in the trauma center. Right? Nobody thinks it's going to happen to them. Every patient I've ever had the privilege of caring for or I should say, no patient I've ever had the privilege of caring for has gotten awake in the morning and thought, I'm going to go to the trauma bay today, or I'm going to be severely injured in a trauma. This is going to, the unthinkable is going to happen to my family. We don't think like that. We think about all the other life stuff, but it only takes seconds, 30 seconds. And small children get it out from under us in no time at all. No time at all.
It's undoubtedly one of my biggest fears, and like
Sure,
thank
sure.
God I've kind of gone past. My kids are sick. My 6-year-old can fully swim now,
Good.
and he is wonderful, and there's no concern there necessarily. Going through the deep end a little more
Sure.
concern, but at least in the shallow end, like I know he's fine. And my 3-year-old, I feel like we've gone over a major hump with her because she is doing a good job. But man, let me tell you that those first couple years, I would say from the time that my son was growing up until maybe within the last year with my daughter, and still absolutely, I mean, you have to keep an eye. My single biggest fear of going to the pool
Yes.
is something like that happening, where you're with them and you have to take your eye off of one to watch the other, and kids at that age don't listen to begin
Nope.
with, so you're not, you tell them to sit down, they're gonna go up and run.
Right.
And you think that they understand, don't jump in the pool, and all it takes is for them to not be wearing the floaties, and then tragedy happens.
And that's another thing. Floaties are not designed to keep a child from drowning. So that's another piece of this that a lot of parents don't know. Floaties are not designed to prevent drownings.
What about like puddle jumpers?
Still not designed, they will say, the experts tell us that they're not designed to prevent kids from drowning. And lifeguards. You think we're at a lifeguarded pool, my kid's gonna be fine. Lifeguards have to watch every child. They're not necessarily watching your child. And drowning is silent. This, something
Yes.
that I really want to talk about this morning. Drowning does not look like the movies. It doesn't look like the TV where someone's flailing their arms and screaming, because if you're drowning, your sole goal is to keep your head above water and to breathe. So you're paddling underwater, so you don't see the arms flailing, and you're not screaming because you're working so hard to breathe and to keep your head just a little bit above the water of the pool.
And if you have no swimming experience whatsoever, so we're talking about from if you're in the pool as an infant until maybe probably 4 or 5 years old, and for many people, I don't want to short this. We're offering this year adult learn to swim classes in the city.
Great.
because there's so many cases where adults don't know how to swim. So if you don't have the strength or ability, so now I'm going back to kids, toddlers, infants even. If you don't have the strength to even flail your arms, then you may as well just be a rock.
You are a rock. You're sinking to the bottom. You're sinking to the bottom.
You have no ability to make noise
None.
or anything like
that.
that.
None. One of the things we talk about in drowning prevention is having a water watcher. And what a water watcher is an adult competent swimmer who is not either within arm's reach of the child in the pool. I would argue as long as you are within a second of that child, maybe you can even stand on the side and watch, but that person's sole job is to watch your children, watch the children you're responsible for. Eyes on. That means phone down, book down, not having your back and chatting with your friends, not drinking at a barbecue and not really paying attention. You have to be eyes on. And you could take turns, right? You could take turns. So for this 30 minutes, I'm going to be the water watcher. That's my job. Everybody else go have a good time. I'm watching the children that I'm responsible for. And then a half an hour, we'll tap out. And now it's your turn to watch them.
How long does it take for someone to lose consciousness in a drowning situation?
Less than a minute. Less than a minute. We don't have the gift of time when someone is drowning. We don't have time. And that's why having the water watcher, eyes on a child at all times. And I would even argue adults too. No one should swim by themselves. Whether you're 3 or 103, we should not be swimming alone. I swam from the time I was 4 till I was 14. I'm pretty comfortable in the water, but I still don't swim alone because things can happen. It's probably the trauma nurse, wrap them in bubble wrap mentality for myself and others, but you never know. What if something, if I drown, if I get into trouble in a body of water, no matter how competent a swimmer I am, I got a minute. And if I'm alone, the odds that somebody's going to find me in that minute are slim to none.
So let me ask you this, and I will readily admit, over the weekend, I jumped in the pool.
Sure.
I was by myself. There was no one around me. I swam a couple laps, felt wonderful.
Right.
But literally, there was everyone else was in the house,
Yep.
or everyone else was off,
Yep.
nowhere near the pool area. What type of things could happen if you are an able-bodied, healthy individual? What type of things could possibly happen that are in my own blind spot right now?
So and I'm not saying you were, but if you've had any alcohol, if you're impaired at all, you are not as competent a swimmer as you think you are. If you have, if in the heat, talking about heat exhaustion, people can get very dizzy very fast. People can get hypoglycemic. People can drop their blood pressure. I know it's the 1 in a million chance, but if I'm in 8 feet of water and the 1 in a million chances happens to me, that's it. And for me, I have 2 sons to take care of.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to assume that risk because they need a mom. So it's thinking about those things. Again, I know it's wrap them in bubble wrap thinking, but I also know that things can change in an instant. And that's what I see and do every day. You know, things change in an instant, and I don't want to assume. There are certain risks I'm not willing to assume because I am a mom.
This is very much a wrap 'em and bubble wrap type of conversation, but it needs to be had.
100%.
It needs to be had. The
100%.
conversation needs to be had. Bicycles.
Yeah.
Bike safety. Kids are out on their bikes a lot more during the summer months. There's more time. There's more hours during the day. It is lighter later. I would imagine that the number one thing in terms of bicycle-related trauma that you see in the ER is kids not wearing their helmets.
Absolutely. They got to wear a helmet. You have to have them wear a helmet. If you can't afford a helmet, there are agencies that will provide a helmet to your child at no cost. We get one brain, and that goes along with with adults with motorcycles. We get one brain, and you have to protect your brain. If you are riding your bike and you're going 10 miles an hour and you are hit by a car going 35 miles an hour, you will be thrown off that bike at whatever speed, combined speed, the car and the bike are traveling. You're going to go through the air, and there's no way that we can, I keep hitting the microphone, I'm sorry. There's no way that we can break our fall with our hands. Our heads are going to break our fall. That's the simple physics of an accident.
I was 13, a little story time with Matt. I was, I want to say I was 11, 12 years old. And when you're 11, 12 years old on a bike, you think you are Superman. And I was wearing a helmet. I was wearing a helmet. So, I mean, that was one thing. I'll give my parents all the credit in the world. I mean, safety, they were very much bubble wrappers. And sometimes it's unavoidable because I was going down a straightaway on a bike, and I was racing my dad, and he was game, and everything was great.
Right.
And I hit the front brake when I should have hit the back brake first.
And what happened?
I went head over the front of the bike, and no helmet's going to stop you from the burn with the concrete that you get. Yeah. And my face was jacked up for a solid 2 weeks. Took me, and I was, in hindsight, knowing what I know now about bike accidents and the way things, I was so lucky.
Yeah.
I was beyond lucky. Yeah. But this was something that I was wearing a helmet. That didn't help me because I was being reckless.
Right.
And I wasn't thinking, and I realized, oh, bleep, you're going too fast.
Right.
And in the moment, you're not thinking about it.
No.
And you just hit the brake.
Right.
You don't know if you're hitting the front brake or the back brake. And I hit the wrong brake. 50-50 shot. I lost.
Yeah.
And that is something that kids, I noticed over the weekend, there was an accident in a neighboring municipality involving someone who was going down a hill. And older gentleman, bike rider all the time. And you see a picture of him in the ER. Guy's lucky to be alive right now.
Yeah. It's bicycle riding your bike is a lot of fun. Riding a bike is a lot of fun, but there are some dangers that can happen whether you're an adult or a child, and we see it. And again, I'm not suggesting don't ride your bike. If it brings you great joy and you love to ride your bike and that's something you do for exercise and wellness, ride your bike.
Yeah, you can make the argument that riding a bike is safer than driving a car.
Sure, but put a helmet on.
Yes.
Wear bright clothing. Have the right reflectors and the right equipment. Make sure your bike's in good working order, and assume you must assume that cars don't see you. You have to assume that cars don't see you. There are drivers driving at all hours of the day and night who are impaired.
If you're riding your bike at dusk, because we talked about staying out later.
Sure.
If you're riding your bike at dusk, should you try to avoid biking on the road in that instance because of what you just said?
Yeah, I'd be very cautious.
Or at the very least, make sure you have the flasher reflector.
Flashers, reflectors, reflective clothing, the vests that light up, anything to catch a driver's eye, because they're not looking for you on the bike. They're just not. And I wish we lived in a different world.
Yeah.
You can say, well, they should, and I will say, well, they aren't, right? They're distracted. On a good day, most drivers are distracted, and they're not looking for bicyclists. I wish it was different. I wish the opposite was true. but the reality is they're not always looking.
We've hit on, and we're running out of time. I know we've hit on fireworks. We've hit on drowning, pool
Yes.
safety. We've hit on bicycles. What else do we need to keep in mind for our kids, for our children, as we kind of go throughout the last couple months of summer?
Sure. I'd like to, ATVs, I think, are really an important thing to talk about. I think we've seen some very horrible, tragic deaths with people who've been on ATVs, adults and children, in the last year. And I think we have to remember that ATVs are not toys, they're vehicles. And so, the American Academy of Pediatrics says no children under the age of 8 should operate an ATV, and supervision 16 and under. So essentially, if you're an unlicensed driver, you shouldn't be operating an ATV.
Makes sense.
There's so much less safety equipment in an ATV than there is in a car or a truck. So if you're traveling on your ATV and you're going 20 or 25 miles an hour and you hit something and come to a stop, your body is still going 20, 25 miles an hour through the air. And the reality of it is, again, like we talked about with bikes or with bicycles, what's going to break your fall is your head. So a full helmet, full face helmet, full head helmet, right, but your head's going to hit that
right,
first.
Exactly.
Right. So making sure you're protecting your brain, making sure you're wearing the protective gear, boots, not flip-flops, not sneakers, boots. Make sure you've taken a safety class for ATVs, and just being supervised, especially for kids. If you're an adult, make sure you're telling people where you're going. Make sure you're riding in pairs. I get it. It's very freeing to be out on an ATV in the middle of nowhere and you're riding and you're having fun and the wind's in your hair, all that sense of freedom. But there are potentially shattering consequences to that. Shattering consequences, not just to the rider, but to the loved ones who are left behind as well.
So, I mean, should you be bringing your kids out on an ATV? Even like if you're a responsible adult, and your child is wearing a helmet, is that okay?
I think you as a parent have to understand you're assuming that risk. I'm not comfortable telling parents how to parent.
Sure.
Right? But I would say that when you are operating an ATV and you have your children with you, you must exercise extreme caution. You go around a bend, your small child's not holding on tightly, or your preschool age preteen child isn't holding on. You go around a bend, that child's flying out.
This isn't a roller coaster.
Correct.
Where there are
it's not a toy.
Safety.
It's not a toy.
Exactly.
It's a vehicle.
Right.
So you have to think along those lines when you're talking about ATVs.
Wow. Amy, I can't thank you enough for having these difficult conversations with us. It is super important for everyone to be listening and paying attention. Thankfully, this conversation will live on forever. This is one of those evergreen conversations where whether it's 2023 or 2033 or 2043, as long as YouTube is still out there, this conversation will exist. And these issues, which have been around for 50 years, will continue to be part of our annual conversation when it comes to summer safety. So, Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
That's the word, Harrisburg. Thank you again so much to Amy Bollinger from Penn State Health. Really appreciate this conversation when it comes to summer child safety. And we will catch you next time here on WHBG Channel 20.